Hello, welcome to day 4, question mark, of Sense and Sensibility. Ooh, let me see. Interesting, okay. I'm just looking at some chat features that I can play with. Nice to have you all back. It's been a day and another long list of days. Just doing work today, nothing interesting. Read a book outside, different book than this. Very interesting to read a different book that's not classic literature. It's a fantasy novel that I got for free at Comic-Con one year, and it's actually pretty good. The first novel that I picked up for free from them was not good, but this one is. So that's nice. That's nice to do. Hello, Patricia. I'm gonna go ahead and make you a moderator. So if anything funky happens, you can kill it. Okay, cool. So Patricia, I just think that means that if you see anybody doing anything weird in the chat, you can kick them out. So I trust you fully to use that privilege. Uh, yeah, so nothing too exciting today, just killing time until 3:02 when I can start my summary, and then, ooh, look, you got a little tool next to you. That's so cute. I love that. Um, Yep, just killing time till 3:02, and I could do my summary of yesterday, which will be incredibly brief, because not much happened yesterday except for world building, which is great. We love world building. Oh, look, it's 3:02. So yesterday, in Sense and Sensibility, the Dashwood sisters and Dashwood mom moved into their new cottage. It wasn't like the best cottage ever, but it's not the worst cottage ever. And the mom's like, we could probably do some improvements on this. Like, this isn't the worst thing to ever happen to us. Excuse me. Um, I've coughed none at all today, and now all of a sudden I feel like I really have to cough a lot. Luckily, who knows? Who knows? Are we lucky? We may never know. And then Mr. Middleton, the guy who sold them the house, was like, "Hello, how can I make myself of use? Anything you need." And the ladies were like, "No, no, it's really okay. Like, you don't have to do anything." He's like, "Anything. I will do anything for you." And the women were like, "Oh God." But he sounds like he's well-meaning. We like him. And then chapter, what is this? 7? This was 6. So now it's 7. What happened? Did anything else happen in chapter? I don't think so. No, sounds like they just chilled. All right. Let's get started. Let's see what happens today. Just fun fact, I feel like most of us are theater lovers in the chat currently. I don't know if you guys have been listening to the Sondheim birthday concert. It's very prime. I would highly recommend. It's real fun. Steven Spielberg is in it, which is great, and so are a bunch of other incredible, cool theater people. Not Steven Spielberg is really a theater person. One might venture to call him a film person, but just thought I'd mention it. It's like 2.5 hours. I was listening to it while I was doing my quilt. And I didn't make it all the way through, but it's fine. There's no plot. Okay. Anyways, Sense and Sensibility, Chapter 7. Barton Park was about half a mile from the cottage. The ladies had passed near it in their way along the valley, but it was screened from their view at home by the projection of a hill. I can't do it. A hill. The house was large and handsome, and the Middletons lived in a style of equal hospitality and elegance. The former was for Sir John's gratification, the latter for that of his lady. They were scarcely ever without some friends staying with them in the house, and they kept more company of every kind than any other family in the neighborhood. It was necessary to the happiness of both, for however dissimilar in temper and outward behavior, they strongly resembled each other in that total want of talent and taste which confined their employments, unconnected with such as society produced, within a very narrow compass. Sir John was a sportsman, Lady Middleton a mother. He hunted and shot, and she humored her children, and these were their only resources. Lady Middleton had the advantage of being able to spoil her children all year round, while Sir John's independent employments were in existence only half the time. Continual engagements at home and abroad, however, supplied all the deficiencies of nature and education, supported the good spirits of Sir John, and gave exercise to the good breeding of his wife. Lady Middleton piqued herself upon the elegance of her table, and of all her domestic arrangements, and from this kind of vanity was her greatest enjoyment at any of their parties. But Sir John's satisfaction in society was much more real. He delighted in collecting about him more young people than his house would hold, and the noisier they were, the better was he pleased. He was a blessing to all the juvenile part of the neighborhood, for in summer he was for ever forming parties to eat cold ham and chicken out of doors. I want a party to eat cold ham and chicken out of doors. In winter, his private balls were numerous enough for any young lady who was not suffering under the insatiable appetite of 15. The arrival of a new family in the country was always a matter of joy to him, and in every point of view he was charmed with the inhabitants he had now procured for his cottage at Barton. The Miss Dashwoods were young, pretty, and unaffected. It was enough to secure his good opinion, for to be unaffected was all that a pretty girl could want to make her mind as captivating as her person. The friendliness of his disposition made him happy at accommodating those whose situations might be considered, in comparison with the past, as unfortunate. In showing kindness to his cousins, therefore, he had the real satisfaction of a good heart, and in settling a family of females only in his cottage, he had all the satisfaction of a sportsman, for a sportsman, though he esteems only those of his sex who are sportsmen likewise, is not often desirous of encouraging their taste by admitting them to a residence within his own manor. So he basically is just trying to form a commune of only women in his city. Perhaps the jury is still out on Sir John. Mrs. Dashwood and her daughters were met at the door of the house by Sir John, who welcomed them to Barton Park with unaffected sincerity, and as he attended them to the drawing-room, repeated the young ladies the concern with which the same subject had been drawn from him the day before, and at being unable to get any smart young men to meet them. They would see, he said, only one gentleman there besides himself, a particular friend who was staying at the park, but who was neither very young nor very gay. He hoped they would all excuse the smallness of the party, and they could assure them it could never happen again. It should never happen so again. He had been to several families that morning in hopes of procuring some addition to their number, but it was moonlight and everybody was full of engagements. Luckily, Lady Middleton's mother had arrived at Barton within the last hour, and she was a very cheerful, agreeable woman, and he hoped the young ladies would not find it so very dull as they might imagine. The young ladies, as well as their mother, were perfectly satisfied with having two entire strangers of the party, and wished for no more. Mrs. Jennings, Lady Middleton's mother, was a good-humored, merry, fat, elderly woman who talked a great deal, seemed very happy, and rather vulgar. She was full of jokes and laughter, and before dinner was over, had said many witty things on the subject of lovers and husbands, hoped they had not left their hearts behind them in Sussex, and pretended to see them blush whether they did or not. Marianne was vexed at it for her sister's sake, and turned her eyes towards Eleanor to see how she bore these attacks, with an earnestness which gave Eleanor far more pain than could arise from such commonplace raillery as Mrs. Jennings. Colonel Brandon, the friend of Sir John, seemed no more adapted by resemblance of manner to be his friend than Lady Middleton was to be his wife, or Mrs. Jennings to be Lady Middleton's mother. He was silent and grave. His appearance, however, was not unpleasing, in spite of his being, in the opinion of Marianne and Margaret, an absolute old bachelor, for he was on the wrong side of 35. He's 35? But though his face was not handsome, his countenance was sensible, and his address was particularly gentlemanlike. So Colonel Brandon is played by Alan Rickman in this movie, and that's all I'll say. Yeah. Anyways, there was nothing in any of the party which could not recommend them companions to the Dashwoods, but the cold insipidity of Lady Middleton was so particularly repulsive that in comparison of it, the gravity of Colonel Brandon, and even the boisterous mirth of Sir John and his mother-in-law was interesting. Lady Middleton seemed to be roused to enjoyment only by the entrance of her four noisy children after dinner, who pulled her about, tore her clothes, and put an end to every kind of discourse except what related to themselves. In the evening, as Marianne was discovered to be musical, she was invited to play. The instrument was unlocked, everybody prepared to be charmed, and Marianne, who sang very well, at their request went through the chief of the songs which Lady Middleton had brought into the family on her marriage, and which perhaps had lain ever since in the same position on the pianoforte, for her ladyship had celebrated that event by giving up music, although by her mother's account she had played extremely well, and by her own was very fond of it. Jane Austen is wonderful, but she does really long sentences that I forget what the beginning of the sentence was about by the time I hit the end. Um, yep. Marianne's performance was highly applauded. Sir John was loud in his admiration at the end of every song, and as loud in his conversation with the others while every song lasted. Lady Middleton frequently called him to order, wondered how anyone's attention could be diverted from music for a moment, and asked Marianne to sing a particular song which Marianne had just finished. Colonel Brandon, alone of all the party, heard her without being in raptures. He paid her only the compliment of attention, and she felt a respect for him on the occasion, which the others had reasonably forfeited by their shameless want of taste. His pleasure in music, though it amounted not to that ecstatic delight which alone could sympathize with her own, was estimable when contrasted with the horrible insensibility of the others, and she was reasonable enough to allow that a man of 35 might well have outlived all acuteness of feeling and every exquisite power of enjoyment. She was perfectly disposed of to make every allowance for the colonel's advanced state of life which humanity required. So Marianne's like, yeah, he's old, but at least he has taste. Oh, Marianne, you're only 16. Chapter 9. Is that right? I don't think that's right. 5, 6, 7. Chapter 8. Mrs. Jennings was a widow, and with ample jointure. She had only 2 daughters, both of whom she had lived to see respectably married, and she had now therefore nothing to do but marry all the rest of the world. In the promotion of this object she was zealously active, as far as her ability reached, and missed no opportunity of projecting weddings among all the young people of her acquaintance. She was remarkably quick in the discovery of attachments, and had enjoyed the advantages of raising the blushes and the vanity of many a young lady by insinuations of her power over such a young man, and this kind of discernment enabled her soon after her arrival at Barton decisively to pronounce that Colonel Brandon was very much in love with Marianne Dashwood. Oh, God. Okay. He's 35, she's 16. Huh? That's not right. Oh, God. Okay. She rather suspected it to be so on the very first evening of their being together, from his listening so attentively while she sang to them, and when the visit was returned by the Middletons dining at the cottage, the fact was ascertained by his listening to her again. It must be so. She was perfectly convinced of it. It would be an excellent match, for he was rich and she was handsome. Mrs. Jennings had been anxious to see Colonel Brandon well married ever since her connection with Sir John first brought him to her knowledge, and she was always anxious to get a good husband for every pretty girl. Here's what I've resolved myself to. These matches of this sort happen and are to be celebrated by those of Austen's era. Nowadays, they would not be celebrated, but this sort of thing, not that they get together, just for my own sense of mind, this sort of thing, I'm just going to pretend she's 24 and get on with it. And that's just what I'm going to do. She's just, suddenly everyone's older, and that's what I'm going to make do. Because this was technically good in her time, but deeply concerning nonetheless. Here we go. The immediate advantage to herself was by no means inconsiderable, for it supplied her with endless jokes against them both. At the park she laughed at the colonel, and in the cottage at Marianne. To the former her raillery was probable, as far as it regarded himself, perfectly indifferent. But to the latter it was at first incomprehensible, and when its object was understood, she hardly knew whether most to laugh at its absurdity or to censure its impertinence, for she considered it as an unfeeling reflection on the colonel's advanced years, and on his forlorn condition as an old bachelor. Mrs. Dashwood, who could not think a man 5 years younger than herself, I oh boy. I don't know if I. Whew. Okay. Whew, okay, I'm okay, okay. It's okay, it's okay. Mrs. Dashwood, who could not think a man 5 years younger than herself, so exceedingly ancient as he appeared to the youthful fancy of her daughter, ventured to clear Mrs. Jennings from the probability of wishing to throw ridicule on his age. But at least, oh shit. Who's speaking? Okay, I think this must be Marianne. Okay. Oh, God. Okay. There's gonna be a line in here that we're not gonna like, but we're gonna have to put up with it. Okay. But at least, mamma, you cannot deny the absurdity of the accusation, though you may not think it intentionally ill-natured. Colonel Brandon is certainly younger than Mrs. Jennings, but he is old enough to be my father, and if he were ever animated enough to be in love, must have long outlived every sensation of the kind. It is too ridiculous. When is a man to be safe from such wit if age and infirmity will not protect him? Infirmity, said Eleanor. Do you call Colonel Brandon infirm? I can easily suppose that his age may appear much greater to you than to my mother, but you can hardly deceive yourself as to his having the use of his limbs. Oh my God! Did you not hear him complain of rheumatism? And is it not that the commonest and is it not that the commonest infirmity of declining life? My dearest child, said her mother, laughing, at this rate you must be in continual terror of my decay, and it must seem to you a miracle that my life has been extended to the advanced age of 40. Mamma, you are not doing me justice. I know very well that Colonel Brandon is not old enough to make his friends yet apprehensive of losing him in the course of nature. He may live 20 years longer. But 35 has nothing to do with matrimony. 35? I'm going to be lucky if I'm married at 35. Perhaps, said Eleanor, 35 and 17 had better not have anything to do with matrimony together. Thank God, Eleanor is out here spitting the truth. But if there should be any chance happen to be a woman who is single at 27, I should not think Colonel Brandon's being 35 any objection to his marrying her. A woman of 27, said Marianne, after pausing a moment, can never hope to feel or inspire affection again. Jesus! And if her home be uncomfortable or her fortune small, I can suppose she might bring herself to submit to the offices of a nurse, for the sake of the provision and security of a wife. In his marrying such a woman, therefore, there would be nothing unsuitable. It would be a compact of convenience, and the world would be satisfied. In my eyes, it would be no marriage at all, but that would be nothing. To me, it would seem only a commercial exchange, in which each wished to be benefited at the expense of the other. It would be impossible, I know, replied Eleanor, to convince you that a woman of 27 could feel for a man of 35 anything near enough to love to make him a desirable companion to her. But I must object to your dooming Colonel Brandon and his wife to the constant confinement of a sick chamber merely because he chanced to complain yesterday, a very cold, damp day, of a slight rheumatic feel in one of his shoulders. But he talked of flannel waistcoats, said Marianne, and with me flannel waistcoats is invariably connected with aches, cramps,
rheumatisms, and every species of ailment that can afflict the old and the feeble. Whew, whew. Um, had he been only in a violent fever, you would not have despised him half so much. Confess, Marianne, is not there something interesting to you in his flushed cheek and hollow eye, and quick pulse of a fever? Soon after this, upon Eleanor's leaving the room, Mamma, said Marianne, I have an alarm on the subject of illness, which I cannot conceal from you. I am sure Edward, hello, my name is Edward. Wait, what happened? Did I say something weird? Whose wife? What did I say? His who? A fever? Displeased to have so much? His waistcoat? I was talking about his waistcoat? Okay, you're gone. No. I didn't say. When did I say that? Oh my God, no, you're right. Wait. Because they were talking about, I see what you're talking about. There is the line Colonel Brandon and his wife, but they're talking about a fictitious wife. They're talking about him marrying some 27-year-old girl. And them being like the super old couple. It's a fictitious wife. He's not married. I once again repeat, Colonel Brandon is single. They were talking about a fake wife. Okay, I was like, oh my God, what did I do? But it turns out it was Jane Austen all along. Okay. All right, back to Edward. I am sure Edward Ferris is not well. We have now been here almost a fortnight, and yet he does not come. Nothing but real indisposition could occasion this extraordinary delay. What else can detain him at Norland? Have you any idea of his coming so soon? Said Mrs. Dashwood. I had none. On the contrary, if I have felt any anxiety at all on the subject, it has been in recollecting that he sometimes showed a want of pleasure and readiness in accepting my invitation when I talked of his coming to Barton. Does Eleanor expect him already? Who's Jane? I'm just going to keep reading. I have never mentioned it to her, but of course she must. I rather think you are mistaken, for when I was talking to her yesterday of getting a new grate for the spare bedchamber, she observed that there was no immediate hurry for it, as it was not likely that the room would be wanted for some time. How strange this is! What can be the meaning of it? But the whole of their behaviour to each other has been unaccountable. How cold, how composed were their last adieus! How languid their conversation the last evening of their being together! In Edward's farewell there was no distinction between Eleanor and me. It was the good wishes of an affectionate brother to both. Twice did I leave them purposely together in the course of the last morning, and each time did he most unaccountably follow me out of the room. And Eleanor, in quitting Norland and Edward, cried not as I did. Even now her self-command is invariable. When is she dejected or melancholy? When does she try to avoid society or appear restless and dissatisfied in it? Marianne's like, girl, you are not sad enough. Be sadder. And that's also the end of the chapter. How interesting. Knowing how this turns out, Patricia, I'm gonna unmoderate you. Knowing how this turns out, I'm excited to see Marianne's character development because it's gonna have to go a long way. Yeah, so just wanted to say one thing before we sign off. I don't know if you guys noticed, but yesterday there was a very unwelcome comment in the chat section, which has prompted me to learn a lot about how to mute and block people on YouTube in the past 24 hours. But just want you guys to know that I now know how to do that. So collectively, we can all stop sexual harassment in the chat of my classic literature for women reading. One would think one would be safe within the halls of Jane Austen, and yet here we are. So just help me out. If something like that happens again, just ignore it.
and I'll kick it out, and hopefully Patricia will help. Um, and we'll just eject it. It will be nothing. I've blocked the person. It won't happen again. So we will just live and let live because should be a safe and fun place for everybody. Um, and it's just like, I don't even know, man. Figure your own shit out somewhere else, not in my Jane Austen book chat. Bye. Okay. Signing off for today. Thank you all. You guys rock. I will find more things to mispronounce for you tomorrow, and you will find more ways that gives you. I'm glad that gives you joy. I will continue to mispronounce. I'll find a new way to say Jane Eyre. I don't agree with it. I don't agree with it. There is no air. Who? All right. I'm leaving. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow's Tuesday, so I will be in at 1 for chapters 9 and 10. 9 and 10. Okay. See you guys soon. Bye.